There's basically three things you need to know about the Internet of Things. The first is that it's not really new, and this may seem strange because you're only maybe now just hearing of it. But in fact, it's like a 50-year-old automation operation, and it was known as pervasive computing or ubiquitous computing in around 2000 as ambient intelligence. It's only around 2000 that the term the Internet of Things comes up, and there's something else happening around that time, and that's the cloud. So basically all these smart gadgets, the things that we talk about, smart homes, wearables, smart cars, smart cities, all this attaching connectivity to objects, making them smart or intelligent, is happening in the 70s, 80s and the 90s. But then there is no cloud. There's no ability to store that data. So you can only do demos. And around 2000, the cloud, an immense amount of server storage space opens up. And then it becomes possible to actually see what we see nowadays. So basically every operation, every commercial operation is building on intelligent or smart objects, which is now then called Internet of Things. So the fact that it's not really new is really important because it's happening very, very fast, and it can seem as if it's happening overnight, but it's not happening overnight. It's been happening for the past 50, 60 years, but it's been happening at the back end. It's not been happening in the front. It's not been happening in your everyday environment. It's been happening in the factories and in automation. Now the second thing that's really important is that this Internet of Things is something that will encompass or sort of will be in your everyday life in such a way that it basically becomes invisible. So it's there, but you may not really notice that it's there. And that's because it's built on invisibility, it's built on waves, and it's built on radio, and you don't really see this. As we humans are really tuned to basically only looking at what's in front of us and looking at things that we can touch, tangible things, all the things that we really cannot see, all these invisible things, is really difficult for us to grasp immediately as something important. This Internet of Things is not really about technology, but it's about management and operational efficiency. In fact, it's about politics, and in fact, even to say even more, it's about power. And that's why I'm interested in it, because I'm not so much interested in Internet of Things as a technology, because it's pretty mundane and pretty simple as well. It's not rocket science, it's radio, and most engineers also are not really excited by the fact that it's so technologically so difficult or so complex, because actually it's not. But the repercussions are immense, and that's why I'm interested in it, because it's creating massive disruption in basically every part of our society. So let's look at this Internet of Things basically sort of what it is, and then you have two main strands, and one is really everything going on in a passive way, which is objects that will have some kind of a tag that can be read out in some way. So we all know the barcodes. The barcodes are from 1974. It was a massive operation in stakeholder management and ecosystem management to actually make that happen. But basically now every object on the planet has a barcode. Now if you would have said this in 1974, people would have said, oh, I'm not really sure if we can actually do this, but we can. Now this barcode is identifying, let's say, if you have bottles of Cokes, 1,000 bottles of Cokes or 10,000 bottles of Cokes. But as we speak, we're going down to item level. And item level means that every object on this planet, every shirt, every bottle of Coke, every bottle of water, every packet of coffee will have its own unique identifier. And this will happen through either radio frequency identification or near-field communication, that's in your phone basically already, or some smart tags or barcodes or smart barcodes. This line of connectivity is still basically passive, but it's really important. It means that from now on, you've got to look at the world as a world full of digital twins, as they call it. So every object has its unique virtual representation somewhere in the cloud. Now, what is the cloud? The cloud is just your computer. The cloud is just computer storage. It's this beautiful word that actually takes it up to the cloud, but in fact, it's just all our computers combined. That and what is called a lot of mathematics in these computers, virtualization, which is an operation that has led to actually the possibility to store all this data, it seems, in a kind of endless way. Now, the cloud is this basically all these farms of all these computers, all these servers just humming out there, and the edge is all the computing power that's in your own devices. So that's the computing power that's in your car. That's the computing power that's in your coffee machine, in your camera, in your phone, and this is in a lantern pole. And all these computers, that's basically already your phone or your coffee machine or your washing machine, are getting stronger in terms of processing power, and are also getting stronger in terms of storage. So this means that instead of your washing machine sending information directly, continuously to the cloud, having to have some kind of connectivity that's continuously running, which you also have to pay for, the data coming from the washing machine is actually being stored on the washing machine for, let's say, about an hour or 2 hours or a day, and then sending that accumulated data up to the cloud twice a day or 3 times a day. So this means that what people are now talking about, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, all of this may be possible in and on your washing machine, so that the washing machine actually becomes smart, but locally smart. So the edge is basically all the devices that can be around you, that have more processing power, more storage power, that basically can run their own operating system. Now, all of this has gone so extremely fast. It was basically impossible to think about this 50 years ago, 30 years ago. But with the extreme speed in this, technologically speaking, it now becomes possible to basically run analytics, to run scenarios, run processing management of your entire home on the washing machine, because the washing machine also knows the Nest, maybe, or some other smart thermostat. It knows what the coffee machine is doing, it knows what your devices are doing, and it can actually maybe then keep some spare amount of processing power to do some mining of some coins if you want to do that in your home as well. Internet of Things is going to make every object smart. So it's either going to be digitally addressable. So it means that we're going to be able to identify every object on this planet, or it's actually going to send some information because we'll have some processing power. Now, then it's clear that not one governance model from this old system, from anything beyond the 50s of the last century, will be able to stand. And this is what we feel. We feel that it's all sort of crumbling, and it's not. And our politicians and the people that are doing the governance, they have no real answer to this. They have no clue. Of course, I mean, not all on the planet, and there's some people who actually know what they're doing, but they're not here in Europe, I'm afraid. At the moment, they're in China, and they're in Singapore, they're in Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, and all kinds of countries that are building their own clouds, their own intranets, and are looking out for their own data and their own data systems. As the old tools are no longer working, and the new are not yet there, we are always in a crisis of trust. And this is a historical situation. So basically, in every new moment in history where things change, where new paradigms come up, we need new notions of trust. And now it's nothing different. So now we need a new notion of trust, and in comes the blockchain. And the blockchain is this double ledger system that basically is pretty simple. It means if we make a transaction, that I keep note of that transaction, you keep note of the same transaction, and everybody in the room does the same. So it's becoming impossible to change something in that transaction because everybody has all the data. This was only possible in very particular situations where data was sparse because it was impossible to keep a double book ledger system. If you really wanted to note everything down, it would simply be the amount of paper would be gone. So in this situation, something like the blockchain is really logical, and that's why it's happening, because we lack the trust. Because going from the old situation to the new, we lack trust, and in comes the blockchain, and the blockchain builds this new notion of trust. And it actually builds it with the same technological tools as building IoT. And this is now creating a massive amount of work on what is called fintech, on blockchain, on ICOs. There's about 1,600 of these ICOs. There's all kinds of people that are building their own blockchains and then running their own coins, their own tokens on it, and it's becoming real in a sense that it's hitting real use cases. And when it's hitting real use cases, it's starting to build real value, and when it's building real value, it's becoming real business. And that's the situation in which basically we are in now. So blockchain, distributed ledger technology, Internet of Things, trust is all connected with this strange paradigm shift of this old situation based on the book, based on patents, based on exclusivity, based on hiding information, to the Internet of Things, which is based on transparency, based on openness, based on sharing information. And that's I think it's a fantastic shift, because it will bring much more common sense into decision making. The GDPR is a perfect tool for China. It would be a perfect tool for a position in which you own a system. So basically China has a huge integration, and they could actually implement GDPR and actually sort of hard code it. For Europe at this moment in time, the GDPR is the least effective attempt to deal with this digital transition. I was in the expert group on the Internet of Things in 2009, 2010, and we had momentum. So the European Parliament came out with a memorandum on the Internet of Things and talking yogurt pots. There were a few MPs who really got it, and so the Commission had set up this expert group on Internet of Things headed by Gerald Santucci. Now, and in this expert group, I was present, and I witnessed, especially the article Working Party 29, and a lot of French sort of thinkers being really upset with Facebook and the Americans and sort of and all of this happening. It was quite logical and quite real, but I also understood and saw that they had no clue about Internet of Things. They did not understand this digital transition. They did not understand the fact that this is you go into a hybrid reality in which all around us, this Internet of Things will be infused in basically all these objects. So trying to regulate your mailbox by not having spam is the equivalent of trying to walk in a city and trying not to see ads. So all of this boils down to learning people the skills to deal with this, not trying to get them out of this situation or try to regulate what's coming in. That is something that is definitely unhelpful, it's ineffective, and it's actually, I would say, the least welcome response that we have at this moment. We can have at this moment in Europe, and it's going to handicap us. It's already handicapping us. It's going to keep people more in their bubbles than not, and effectively, I would say, it's really detrimental in helping policymakers to understand what's really happening. So the GDPR is not addressing any of the drivers of this digital transition. It's only looking at the consequences. It's trying to regulate the consequences, the repercussions of what's happening. That is actually only giving a kind of a legal response, but you cannot have a legal lawyer response towards a paradigm shift. it's very important to understand the real deep transition that is this Internet of Things. Which means that we come from this analog situation in which we are people, we have some objects, and we had hundreds or thousands of years of people actually hugging trees or believing that things were alive, and animism is still a very... But what we're doing now is we are putting a tag on everything on the planet, and logically this creates a world in which then all the meaning starts to work on this tag and no longer on the real object. And this is... So we take the very notion of living and life to a different level. On this level, our notions of analog, our belief that we can reason with things, or there's always a third party involved. So there's always a third party in the Internet of Things. You're never alone in a room. You're never alone even with your clothes. Your clothes are radiating data, you yourself. So how can you have old-fashioned 19th century Rousseau privacy in a situation like this? It's impossible. So privacy becomes something like privacies. And that is some kind of agency between me, my clothes, my objects, and the environment. So privacy becomes, let's say, a relationship between my environment, my objects, and me. This is something that millennials actually get because they grew up in this situation. And this is also why policymakers who are not engineers, who do not understand this, like old school politicians, like the ones we have in our governments and at the moment also in the Commission, and do not really understand what this transition is. So if you even keep telling people that you can still have privacy in the old-fashioned notion in this world, you're totally irresponsible. It's really irresponsible because it's totally gone. So what you need is you need to educate your people into this new situation. And in a way, and of course people are going to be quite upset if I say this. In a way, the only ones who are really doing this is the Chinese government. Now, of course, they have the social credit system, and this is not what we want. We don't want to give people scores and votes and sort of like the Shanghai Honesty Hub draws on 3,000 resources and blah, blah, blah. But if we want agency, if we want to have European agency, if we want to have a 500 million zone in Europe, and if we don't own our own data, and if we don't have any educational programs on this new transition, on this new field, we're going to live in Facebook world, and our cities are going to be run by Huawei. And this is already happening as we speak. So Huawei will build our infrastructure, and Facebook will run our networks. And the GDPR is not any type of, I mean, this is war, it's like we got some tanks lined up on the other side, and we got some people who have some tools to sort of take a fly off the wall, which to me is GDPR. And I don't see that working out really well. So if data is the new gold, and then you should own that data in your own European cloud. Now, we have some good practice in Europe. We have Estonia. We have the Estonian e-card. 80-90% of the Estonian services are run on that card. Well, the term the Internet of Everything should never be used. that's because it's a Cisco term. It's pure Cisco. So if you use an Internet of Everything, you're sponsored by Cisco or should be paid by Cisco because it's fully Cisco and Qualcomm. And every month or so, I go on Wikipedia and I take out the AKA Internet of Everything in brackets that Cisco puts up there in the Internet of Things lemma. So now we have to be careful and honest about this. So the reason why ambient intelligence did not catch on is because Philips was sponsoring it. So people were were realizing if we use ambient intelligence, we're actually in a Philips ecosystem. And IBM was the key sponsor for pervasive computing, and Xerox PARC for ubiquitous computing. And those were basically part of the reasons why the names did not win. Now finally we have the Internet of Things, which is a neutral term, coined by Kevin Ashton, a product manager by Procter & Gamble. And we should keep using the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is a wide term, but the Internet of Everything is pure Cisco. So if you use it, then you should wear a Cisco sponsoring, or you should get money from Cisco. So don't use it. Though there's no doubt that there is no stopping this Internet of Things. It means that every object will either get some passive tagging or will get some active capacity to actually send information. Whether this will be IPv6 or IP based is unsure. There's another term, it's called splinternet, and this means that systems are moving away from the internet. Because the internet running on IP is fundamentally insecure. Of course, also what we know now with the Snowden papers is that it's impossible to sort of not run the internet without having the NSA basically reading you, because the whole system is flawed from the start. Bob Kahn, Vint Cerf, who thought out the net and the protocols. They are with Vint Cerf with Google since 2005. I was at the Marconi lectures a few years ago when I was basically also outlining this, that it was basically sort of problematic that the same people that set the protocols are actually running all the rewards in terms of data. And he agreed. I mean, he knows that this is really that there have been some either planned or unplanned repercussions or side effects sort of this protocol. So this protocol is a historical sort of moment. We don't have to go and continue this. So what is happening, especially with blockchain, is that people are thinking about new protocols. And these new protocols should be in devices and in systems, and then should build a system in which security becomes a real service, not some kind of add-on. So that's exactly what we are proposing that we do in Europe, is that we build our own system. We look at the internet as a historical situation, not as a given, not as something that we should perpetuate. We look at the situation in which at the moment in Europe, we do not run clouds, we do not own or run platforms, we have no governance for the Internet of Things. The only reason why we have some good region doing things in Europe is Germany, is because Angela Merkel's an engineer. And the automotive guys went to her 10 years ago and said, we lose manufacturing for Germany if we don't act, and she acted. So what we need, and this is what we're actually doing in Next Generation Internet with our team, is we are going all across Europe to set up meetings. And tomorrow I'm going to be in Montenegro. I just came back from Denmark, talking to the engineers, and it's really spreading like wildfire. So all across Europe, people are beginning to see that we need new governance models, new governance structures, and it all boils down to owning your own data, having your data sovereignty. And this means that we are setting up meetings and running really, really high-level policy, doing really a lot of policy talks, ministerial levels in countries across Europe, that actually think about building their own systems, which means owning the infrastructure, doing your own spectrum management, having your own cloud, and doing this with device management. So I'm very, very positive that that we are beginning to see people coming together on Internet of Things, blockchain, sort of fintech, from a social point of view, that want more public agency, that are very, very happy with the way that Europe is actually has actually evolved as a democratic public body of institutions that we all agree that it's best to live in which part, in any part of the world. So it's here. The only way to have Internet of Things and not have a revolution is to have basic income. And that's basically me. I'm also saying this, of course. But this was Robert Reich, who was the former Minister of Labor in the United States, saying this, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. There's no way that we can continue the way we are going with these notions of jobs. Basically, I've said this whole notion of job and having a job, being employed, unemployed is ridiculous in itself, especially with 40-50 youth unemployment percent in Spain, Greece and Italy. So it's really ridiculous to even have people believe that they have a job or should have a job or not have a job, and that this job is 8 days, 8 hours a week, working somewhere, going somewhere with a boss telling you have a job. Ridiculous, nonsense. It's all about tasks and skills, and a world on this new level in this new ontology on Internet of Things has no place for the very notion of a job, which is coming from, let's say, 16th, 17th, 18th century, 19th century way of thinking. It's extremely cruel to all our millennials, who's basically anybody under 35, who actually have so many skills, so many intelligence, so much knowledge, and then they have to go through life being a bit depressed that they don't have a job or something. Jesus, I mean, it's totally ridiculous. So basic income is the only viable option to go with this notion of Internet of Things, because the amount of AI that will start to take out white collar job is going to be enormous. There's a book in the 50s, it's called The Midwich Cuckoos, and in that book there's a village, and in the village all the women get pregnant at the same time. And everybody gets upset, and then they decide not to fuss too much about it, and the kids get born, and they're really beautiful, beautiful babies, beautiful girls, beautiful boys. And there's one philosopher in the village, and he's realizing that all the boys, when they learn something, the other boy learns it too, and with the girls the same. So he's beginning to understand that he's in trouble, and his entire generation is in trouble, because he's a standalone guy, and he's facing this kind of telepathic generation that is sort of seamlessly sort of aware of things. It's a bit magical. So in the end of the book, of this book by John Wyndham, Midwich Cuckoos, the philosopher takes a truck of explosives and blows up all the kids. Now, unfortunately, we cannot blow up all our millennials, because it's a bit too many. But that's basically, like David Bowie, who also said that the internet was an alien technology, that's what we basically are facing. So, like I said, we come from this paradigm of the book. 1452, we could have made everybody literate. In the space of the net, that would have been 50 years. So it would have been the same as in 1500, everybody would have been literate. But we know that it wasn't, and that power distributed learning tools and stopped learning tools for about 450 years. So all these institutions being built with this notion of slowing down and sort of not sharing are now facing a group of people, billion I would say across the world, everybody under 35, who may as well be alien, because they've grown up in this connectivity which is the web. And as I was making websites in the 80s already, but not on the web, not with WW, but with HyperCard and Dreamweaver and all these things, we didn't think about the repercussions of, because for us it was still a liberation. My Foucault and all my Derrida and stuff, when we read that, we sort of like the jouissance of breaking out of the author and killing the author, and then we took it to the link and we clicked ourselves away, and that was brilliant and beautiful, but we didn't really understand what it would mean for somebody growing up in that. Now, the people growing up in that, they have no relationship with this world as they see it whatsoever. For them it's just alien, and it is alien because it's built on totally different principles. It's built on violence, it's built on greed, it's built on not sharing, it's built on notions of exclusivity, not inclusivity. So the moment you close down your devices, everything seems to be strange, and it is strange. Now, that's the good thing. So the good thing is, this is how power shifts. The more people we get that actually think that this world is strange and not the world of the web, not the computers, not the world of WW and the internet, which is actually the real world to me, the more people start believing that it's actually that type of connectivity that we want and not the way that this world is making, that things are going to change. And things are changing. So there's no just need to skill any of these millennials. I would advise any millennial at this moment to walk out of school, to walk out of every university, to walk out of every course, to get together and set up meetings just with millennials, just between you, and pull the plug of this system.